throw like a girl was the worst insult we little boys could throw at one another. Well, unless you said you look like a girl or you are a girl. You see, we little boys were afraid of the girls. We didn't want to talk to them. We didn't want to touch them. We said they had cooties. But then we reached puberty and all of a sudden things changed. And we wanted to talk to girls. And we wanted to touch girls. But you know, I don't think anything was better for the girls either way. Because they were now treated as opposed to poison, now they were treated like sexual objects. It is hard enough being a pimply, awkward teenager, but it's so much harder to be a girl. And especially a girl teenager if there's something different about you. Maybe you're short, maybe you're tall, maybe you wear glasses. You pick it out. Heaven forbid you have a handicap. It is tough to be a teenage girl. Mistreated by the boys, mistreated by the other girls, not called on as often by teachers, maybe treated differently by parents, later on by employers. As a result, many women, dare I say most women, often feel inadequate, inferior, or worthless until they meet Jesus. Every time Jesus met a woman, he was encouraging her, lifting her up, showing her that she was capable of and worth much more than she could possibly know. Join me today in our first story in John chapter 8, verse 3. The scribes and the Pharisees brought to Jesus a woman caught in adultery. And when they had set her in the midst, the word set is literally cast, they threw her down. When they set her in the midst, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman was caught in adultery in the very act." So now they publicly humiliate her, but notice those last two words, the very act. Wait a minute. Isn't this something that takes two? Where's the guy? Worse, notice the story continues. Now Moses in the law, they said, commanded us that such should be stoned. What do you say? This they said, testing him, that they might have something of which to accuse him. Notice she's not even the point. They are using her to try and trip up Jesus. They're using her like evidently the other adulterer was using her. So what does Jesus do? Jesus ignores them, stooped down, wrote on the ground with his finger as though he did not hear. When they continued asking him, he raised himself up and said, famously, "He who is without sin among you, let him throw a stone at her first." Again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. You know, this is the only time we ever see Jesus writing anything. And it disappeared in the dust. What was he writing down? Maybe the names of all those men in the crowd who were also adulterers. Maybe the phone numbers of the girl on the side. Whatever he's writing, we don't know. It's gone. But he stooped down, wrote on the ground. Then those who heard it, being convicted by their conscience, went out one by one. Verse 10, Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. Wait a minute, they threw her down on the ground. Suddenly she's standing up. Did Jesus raise her? Or did he give her the courage to stand on her own? Now she's standing there with Jesus alone. When Jesus has raised himself up, he saw no one but the woman. Not only was no one else there, notice he saw her. Maybe she'd never been seen like a man like that ever before. To see Jesus will change your life. To be seen by Jesus will change you forever. Maybe change how you see yourself. Verse 11, he said, "Woman, where are those accusers of yours? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, Lord." Jesus said to her, "Neither do I condemn you." Wow. Jesus didn't come to condemn the world, but to save the world. He doesn't condemn her. He says, "Go and sin no more." Is he pointing the finger at her? No, actually, you know what he's doing here? He's saying, don't let yourself be an object anymore. Don't let this happen anymore. Today, Baptist Women's Sunday, I want to tell you, no, Jesus wants to tell you, woman, you are more than you know. One day, several years ago, I took my little girl on her day where she would have the talk. She had the talk from Daddy about the birds and the bees, but I took the opportunity to also tell her what a woman is. And I would like you to learn what the Bible says a woman is, so that you might teach your daughter. Maybe it's too late to teach your granddaughter. Woman, so you might know how to see yourself. Husband, so you might know how to understand your wife. And I want us all to begin to see ourselves as Jesus sees us. What is a woman? Well, the poet said a woman is made up of sugar and spice and everything nice. Well, us guys got stuck with snakes and snails and puppy dog tails. But what is a woman? Well, a woman first serves more selflessly. You already heard this morning all the things that the ladies in our church do. Oh, our men serve. In some churches, the men's fellowship is just a softball team where the guys get together having fun. But you can bet women are doing a lot more than that. This woman, yes, like I said a month ago when I talked about men act passionately. But she's also a doer. A woman is a person of action too. Heroic, courageous action. Not just the look at me kind of actions that the men's do. See what I did. She's all business. Like the ideal woman in Proverbs chapter 31. Who can find a virtuous wife, verse 10? For her worth is far above rubies. The heart of her husband safely trusts her, so he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeks wool and flax. She's a businesswoman. Willingly works with her hands. She's like the merchant ships. She brings her food from afar. She rises while it is yet night. Gets up way before him. Gets a lot less sleep. Provides food for her household. He comes home exhausted from work. She comes home from work and she goes to work. She girds herself with strength and strengthens her arms. Her lamp does not go out by night. She extends her hand to the poor. Yes, not only serves her family, but she reaches out her hands to the needy. You see, she's not just a doer. She's a server. She serves selflessly, her family and others. I want you to see a few examples in the Bible. 2 weeks ago, we looked at Rebekah in Genesis chapter 24. When we learned how to find the right one. It's not by looking for the right one, it's by being the right one. We use the story of Rebekah to learn. When the servant of Abraham went out looking for a wife for Abraham's son, he wisely prayed for a character quality rather than what she was wearing or how pretty she was. And sure enough, Rebekah fulfilled that character. She wasn't looking for the right one, otherwise she would have ignored this old man with a wedding ring. No, she was being the right one. And she quickly let down the pitcher and gave him a drink. And then she said, I will draw water for your camels also until they have finished drinking. She quickly emptied her pitcher into the trough, ran back to the well to draw water, and drew for all his camels. We saw 2 weeks ago she was being the right one. Here we see her serving selflessly. And notice quickly she runs 3 times. She was serving enthusiastically. Another woman in the Bible, you might know her as 2 sisters, Mary and Martha. Luke chapter 10, verse 38. Yeah, Martha gets a bum rap sometimes, contrasted with her sister. But notice, Martha welcomed Jesus into her house. She played hostess. Martha was distracted with much serving. And she said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Let's not focus on her complaining. She was serving. She was serving hard. She was serving sacrificially. Tell her to help me, she said to Jesus. Jesus said, Martha, Martha, you are worried and troubled about many things. Well, that's a lot of selfless servant women I know. How about the woman we looked at last year in Acts chapter 9, verse 36? Her name was Tabitha, which is translated Dorcas. If I had the choice, I would choose Tabitha over Dorcas, but this poor girl got stuck with Dorcas. And she was full of good works and charitable deeds. She just didn't do good deeds. She was full of good works and charitable deeds. But she became sick and died. You know what? Her funeral was crowded because she was a selfless servant. Peter showed up and all the widows stood by Peter weeping, showing the tunics and the garments which Dorcas had made while she was with them. You ever notice people who don't give, people who don't do for others, not a lot of people show up at a funeral. No one ever cried at a funeral and said, oh, they were always taking so much. No, it's always they were giving so much. And that's what they say to Peter. And so there were a lot of people at the funeral, and Peter even raised her from the dead, partly because she served faithfully. What is a real woman? A woman of God, someone who serves selflessly, enthusiastically, sacrificially, faithfully. Yes, 1 Peter says she may be the weaker vessel physically in feats of strength, but not in feats of courage. It's just the way God made her. It is actually even in the way her body is built. No, she doesn't have broad shoulders like him to carry heavy loads. She has broad hips to carry a child. No, she doesn't have that broad chest to beat on to draw attention to himself. But no, she has a chest that was actually designed to feed the child. It's just the way God made her. There's a beautiful story of Jesus lifting a woman. We heard it in the children's sermon this morning. Luke chapter 21. Jesus saw the rich putting their gifts into the treasury, and he saw a poor widow putting in 2 mites. Jesus saw her. He saw her loneliness. He saw her pain. He saw her loss. He saw her poverty, her feelings of worthlessness. He also saw her generous gift. And he said, this poor widow has put in more than all. These gave out of their abundance. She out of her poverty put in all that she had. You know what Jesus did? He took her gift of 2 mites and he kissed it into eternity. Jesus saw that she thought her service didn't count. Nobody will notice these 2 cents. But Jesus lifted her into immortality. I don't want to just tell you the story of some women in the Bible. You've seen some, I'll give you some more. I want to tell you about some of the heroic women in my life. I want to start with my mother-in-law. Her name is Carol. She came to Christ later in life. Her husband never gave his heart to the Lord. She serves him faithfully now for over 60 years. She wanted a way to share Jesus with people, so she began children's clubs in her backyard. She would travel around the city and start children's clubs and lead dozens, hundreds of kids to Christ, among whom one little girl, her own daughter, became my wife. I'm so thankful for my mother-in-law, Carol, who's a godly woman who serves selflessly, like so many others. There's a second thing that a woman of God is, a character quality that she has. She feels more passionately. Last month we said men act passionately. She acts, but she serves selflessly, and what she really does passionately is she feels. The woman is, most of the time, much more emotional than the man. We men are pretty much emotionally constipated. But she's much more fully human. She expresses herself and experiences the highs and lows much more than men do. Unfortunately, that means she hurts more. As a result of the sin and fall, to the woman, God said, I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your conception. No, it's not the childbirth, it's the conception. Even sex itself is broken because of sin. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. Our relationships are broken. Have you noticed in the news recently how many women are abused? Here we see women hurt more, feel more passionately. In Exodus chapter 15, remember this is right after the Exodus. And Pharaoh's armies have drowned in the Red Sea. And in Exodus chapter 15, Moses, the men, the women, they all sing this great song of redemption. When they're done, the women get up. And Miriam, Exodus 15:20, the prophetess, the sister of Aaron and Moses, took the timbrel in her hand, think of like a tambourine. And all the women went out after her with timbrels and with dances. You know, women make up most of the cheerleaders, don't they? They're on the sidelines sometimes, but they're cheering enthusiastic. I don't see too many men roaming the sidelines. 1, 2, 3, who's our man? No, that's usually the women, right? Here, Miriam and the women are being cheerleaders. Miriam answered them, sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. Here we see her experiencing higher highs than the men. She danced for joy passionately. 1 Samuel chapter 1, we meet a woman named Hannah who had lower lows. She was childless. She became the mother of Samuel. But when she was barren, her husband wasn't bothered, but she was. Hannah wept and did not eat. She was in bitterness of soul and prayed to the Lord and wept in anguish. Her husband said, come on, it's no big deal. Aren't I better to you than 10 sons? He had no idea of the pain she was experiencing. She was in such sorrow that when she went to the church and prayed, she spoke in her heart, only her lips moved, and Eli the priest thought she was drunk. I have never been that upset. Someone thought I was drunk. But that happens because women express their emotions better than men do, and as a result, they live longer. Hannah wept passionately. How about in Luke chapter 2? Mary, the mother of our Lord, when she took Jesus to church with her husband Joseph to dedicate him to the Lord, Simeon the prophet blessed them and said to Mary, specifically his mother, "Behold, this child is destined for the fall and rising of many in Israel, and for a sign which will be spoken against. Yes, a sword will pierce through your own soul also. Joseph will not hurt like Mary will, as Mary watches her son die." Every parent, but especially every mother, knows the sorrow of seeing a child hurt, failing. She experiences the depths differently, more fully than he does. Why are women different? Well, that's the way God made us. The unisex movement several decades ago said, no, men and women are the same. They just have a little bit of differences on the outside, but if we treat our children the same, then they'll turn out the same. And so let's give our boys dolls, and let's give our girls guns. And you know what happened? The girls took the toy guns, and they wrapped them in blankets, and they treated them like babies. And the boys took the dolls, and they aimed them at each other and shot with them. Why? Because the boys are wired differently than the girls, and the girls differently than the boys. This is not news to us, but it was news to Time magazine in 1992. They actually put on the cover of the magazine, "Why are men and women different?" It occurred to them they are actually different. And it's because it's in the way our brain is wired. It's not just our plumbing that's different. It's our wiring. We are made differently. So much so that you can put a picture of a generic woman on a bathroom, and everybody knows that's for the women, and a generic picture of a man, and we don't look like that. None of us have Charlie Brown circle heads, and not all women are wearing skirts, but it's so universal that we can tell the difference in us from the outside by our plumbing, but there's also a difference inside. Let me illustrate it a couple ways. I want you to quickly look at your nails. 1, 2, 3, go. Now, if you are a female, you probably looked at them this way. 95% of you did. If you're, or you admit you looked at them this way. Which way did you look? Women, which way did you look? And most of us men, we kind of look at, what's wrong with my hands? If I were to give you a match and ask you to put it out, how would you put it out? 95% of the men would shake it out. 95% of the women would blow it out. Why? I don't know. It's just, we're different. If I were to give you a mirror and ask you to look in it, 95% of the men would look and say, "Man, looking good today." 95% of the women wouldn't say that. They'd find something wrong. Why? Because we're different. We're just wired that way. Let me share with you another beautiful story of Jesus lifting a woman, happens to be Mary, weeping at the empty tomb. As she stooped and looked into the tomb and wondering what happened to Jesus' body, she turned and she saw Jesus standing there. But she didn't know it was Jesus. She made a mistake and thought it was the gardener. She didn't recognize it was Jesus until he spoke her name. He said, "What are you looking for?" She said, "I'm looking for Jesus. I don't know where they took him." But then he said her name, Mary. No one says your name like Jesus. She didn't recognize his face, but she recognized his voice. And she was changed forever. Jesus lifted her. She thought her hurt would never get better. You know, I'm outnumbered in my home. I live with 2 females. And I hear quite often, "I'm never going to get better." Amazingly, every time so far, they've gotten better. But they still say the same thing. "I'm never getting better." Mary felt that way, but Jesus lifts her and he changes her. I'll tell you about another woman in my life. Not my wife's mother, but my mother. My mother, like me, is the oldest of 5. My mother, like my children, is a preacher's kid. She grew up in a very, very poor preacher's home. My grandfather was paid $10 a week, and then he might get some eggs on a good week. She didn't have a lot when she was growing up, but she went through the highs and lows in life, and I saw her raising 5 kids, and I saw her laughing with us and laughing at us, and I saw her crying with us. And I'll never forget the time when she most broke my heart. I was 15, and it was my aunt's wedding, my mother's sister's wedding the next day. She was the maid of honor, I was the special music. From the other side of the house, I heard her cry in anguish. And I ran, my dad was away on a trip somewhere, and I ran across to find my mother crumpled on the floor in anguish. She had tried to iron her maid of honor dress that was made of chiffon, and the iron just melted. There was a great big triangle hole in the back. Oh no, I can't stand it. All those people, if it was a guy, we did, look what I did to my pants. But No. She thought she ruined the wedding. And she cried on my shoulder, and I tried to comfort my mother. Mothers are supposed to comfort us. I've seen my mother go through the highest of highs as she rejoices with 5 kids who serve the Lord. I've seen my mom betrayed in ways that no human being should ever be, let alone a loving wife. But she has, through all of that, shown me a love of God and a faithfulness. She serves selflessly, but she also feels passionately. And I am thankful for the godly influence she's been in my life. I'll share with you another characteristic of a true woman of God. She reflects true beauty. Forgive me for talking for a moment about beauty. I didn't talk about that with men. But she focuses on it a lot more than him. You oversleep, he can roll out of bed and doesn't even have to drag a coat through his hair. He's ready to go. She's going to take a nap and she'll just be late. Why? She's not only more beautiful, but she cares more about it. It goes all the way back to the beginning. God made Adam first, and then he said, I think I can do better. And he outdid himself because she is more beautiful. In 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 3 and 4, Peter says, women, don't let your adornment, don't let your beauty be merely outward, arranging the hair, wearing gold, putting on fine apparel. Oh, do all that. But rather let your real beauty be the hidden person of the heart, with the incorruptible, eternal beauty of the gentle and quiet spirit, which is very precious in the sight of God. Notice what he's saying here. Not don't be beautiful, just don't let your beauty come in a hairspray bottle or in a makeup bottle. Don't let your beauty be something that fades with time. Reflect God's glory, and you'll be beautiful inside and out. Draw attention to God, not yourself. Let me give you a few examples. You know, the Old Testament calls him the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Did you know that all 3 of them married knockouts? Abraham married Sarah. And in chapter 12, verse 11, Abraham said to his wife, indeed, I know you are a woman of beautiful countenance. You know, she was 99 at the time. But he was right. All the Egyptian men wanted her at 99. The young woman, Rebekah, not Rachel, was very beautiful to behold. Chapter 24, verse 16, we saw her earlier. This was Isaac's wife. Rachel, that was Jacob's wife. Remember, it was Leah and Rachel. Leah was not so hot, but Rachel was beautiful to form and appearance. Wow. You know what? Like the moon, all 3 of them reflected God's beauty. How about the woman, maybe a less well-known woman, Abigail, 1 Samuel 25:3. The Bible goes out of its way to tell us the name of the man was Nabal, which means fool, and he not only was named fool, he was a fool. The name of his wife was Abigail. She was a woman of good understanding and beautiful appearance, but the man was harsh and evil in his doings. She was so beautiful and so wise that when he passed away, David took him as her bride. And Abigail reflected not only beauty, but God's wisdom. Or how about Esther? There's a beauty queen in the Bible. She's got a book named after her. Mordecai, her cousin, brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter. She had neither father nor mother. She was orphaned. The young woman was lovely and beautiful. Not just lovely, not just beautiful. She was both. When her father and mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. He entered her into the beauty contest that determined her to be the next queen of Persia, and she won. And she not only became queen, she saved the Lord Christ. But she was beautiful outside and inside because Esther reflected God's character. Does that mean, women, your worth as a woman is determined by the subjective opinion of others, or even yourself, how you look? No. Jesus says to you, women, stop seeing yourself through men's eyes. Stop seeing yourself through women's eyes. Stop seeing yourself through your own eyes. Stop comparing yourself to other women, especially the models who are photoshopped. Keep your eyes on God. You see, it's in the way your eyes are turned. Who are you looking at? The worldly standard for beauty? These girls get Barbie dolls where she is like a stick, and no one's body looks like that. Are you going to judge yourself by some impossible standard? Or are you going to reflect God's image of beauty? Okay, if you want to change your looks, if you want to change your body in some way, it's okay. Just don't do it because you hate yourself. Do it because you love yourself. I'll share with you another beautiful story of Jesus lifting a woman. Famous story in John chapter 4 of the woman at the well. Remember the Samaritan woman? She said, why would you talk to me? The disciples came back and said, why are you talking to her? Very interesting conversation. Let's focus for a minute on what Jesus did at the end, verse 17. Jesus said to her, you have well said, I have no husband, for you have had 5 husbands, and the one whom you now have is not your husband. In that you spoke truly. The woman said, sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Jesus wasn't in your face putting her down. Jesus was actually lifting her. She was probably a beautiful woman who had used her beauty to try and get the attention that she craved from so many men. But she had allowed herself to become the plaything of men. And Jesus says, don't do that to yourself. She thinks she's a sexual object, but Jesus lifts her and frees her from all of that. I want to tell you about another important woman in my life. It's the most important woman in my life. It is my soulmate, the love of my life. I will never forget the very first time I saw her. I was an 18-year-old freshman in college with a crush on Farrah Fawcett. And then I found someone who I thought was a lot prettier. Nicer hair, beautiful smile, and I turned to my roommate and I said, you see that girl right there? I said, I wanted to say I'm going to marry her, but I didn't have enough nerve, so I said, I'm going to date her. He said, yeah, right, she's out of your league. She was. But I met her, and I asked her out, and for some strange reason she said yes, and I married her, praise God. Now, I will admit to you that I was a little bit shallow when I judged first on the outside, because I didn't know the inside yet, but when I met her, the inside was more beautiful than the outside. And I'm so thankful that God has put her in my life. She is the most beautiful woman in the world to me, and she's more beautiful on the inside than the outside. She's a godly woman who loves the Lord. She serves sacrificially, yes, she feels more deeply, but she reflects God's true beauty to me and to others. A fourth and a final characteristic of a godly woman, she loves more faithfully. I probably don't have to tell you this. A woman loves more and better than men. She may not have as many muscles to lift like a man, but there's one muscle in her that's more strong than any man, and that's her heart. Ephesians 5:25, Paul tells husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her. You know why he never tells women to love their husbands? Not once does the Bible tell wives, love your husbands. Why? Because it's not required? No, because it's not necessary. That's just the way she is wired. I have a whole shelf of books at home on women who love men who hate women, and women who love too much, and angry men and women who love them, and battered women, and prisoners of men's dreams, and smart women, foolish choices. Women pay more, and Jill came tumbling after. Over and over again, we see women love more. A few examples in the Bible. Luke chapter 7, verse 37, there was that woman who washed Jesus' feet with her tears. And of course the men criticized and said, Jesus, if you knew who this woman was, she's a sinner, you wouldn't let her do that. He said, oh, wait a minute. When I came in here, none of you kissed my feet. None of you washed my feet with your tears. None of you loved me like she did. This woman loved Jesus lavishly. Right about back to Luke chapter 10. Remember Mary and Martha? Martha was serving, but Mary was loving him intimately. Martha said, my sister Mary, she's sitting there at your feet doing nothing, but she sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. Jesus said, one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen that good part which will not be taken away from her. Every time we meet Mary, she's at Jesus' feet. In John chapter 11, her brother Lazarus has died. She falls at Jesus' feet. If you'd been here, my brother would have died. In John chapter 20, we just saw at the tomb, on her knees at Jesus' feet, she loved him more intimately. And one last woman. How about all the women at the cross? Remember the end of the story? Where are all the men when Jesus is hanging on the cross? These fearless men have run and they're hiding behind locked doors. Where are the women? They're there, passionately weeping, but loving Jesus relentlessly. Remember I started with, you throw like a girl. You ever seen a fast-pitch women throwing softball? I couldn't hit like that. I can't throw like that girl. There are some things that you just do better than us, and loving is one of them. It's just in the way your heart is sized. It's just in the way your heart is stretched. That's why you read romance novels. That's why you watch chick flicks. Guys want pulse-pounding action. Women want runaway bride, and wedding date, and wedding planner, and wedding singer, and my best friend's wedding, and my big fat Greek wedding. We don't care about that, but you do, because you talk about love, and you think about love, and you Love is just in the way your heart is sized. One last beautiful story of Jesus lifting a woman, and again, it is Mary, John chapter 12, verse 3. She also pours out very costly oil on his feet, anointing him. Jesus says, let her alone. She has kept this for the day of my burial. Mary thinks Jesus is going and her love will never be returned, but Jesus lifts her. Jesus loves her, and he wants to love you. He wants to change the way you see yourself. He wants to change the way you treat yourself. I said 4 women in my life, I got 1 left. It's my daughter. There's she right down here. God sent a special little girl. I mean little. She was 1.5 pounds, 3 months early. We almost lost her. We did lose her, but God gave her back to us. And as a result of her prematurity, she has a handicap that puts her on a walker or in a wheelchair. My favorite Julia story, we had just moved to Baltimore, and she was in her little wheelchair. We went to the mall. We can't go up the escalator. We got in the elevator, a crowded elevator, 10 or 15 strangers, and my little girl in the wheelchair pipes up at the top of her voice and says, "Who needs a hug?" And the elevator laughed just like that. Some of the people missed it up when they looked down and saw the little girl in the wheelchair. And when the door opened, 10 or 15 strangers got a hug. And if you have been in this church long, you've gotten a hug from that little girl whose heart is the size of Texas. She has inherited her mother's heart. She just loves people. She has the love of Jesus all over her. Women, you serve selflessly. You feel passionately. You reflect true beauty. You love more faithfully. Too many women, maybe some this morning, feel inadequate, inferior, and worthless. But I want to show you this morning, of all things, a soap commercial. Watch this.
I'm a forensic artist. Worked for the San Jose Police Department from 1995 to 2011.
I showed up to a place I'd never been, and there was a guy with a drafting board.
We couldn't see them, they couldn't see us.
Tell me about your hair.
I didn't know what he was doing, but then I could tell after several questions that he was drawing me.
Tell me about your chin.
It kind of protrudes a little bit, especially when I smile.
Your jaw.
My mom told me I had a big jaw.
What would be your most prominent feature?
Kind of have a fat, rounder face.
The older I've gotten, the more freckles I've gotten.
I would say I have a pretty big forehead.
Once I get a sketch, I say thank you very much, and then they leave. I don't see them.
All I had been told before the sketch was to get friendly with this other woman, Chloe.
Today I'm going to ask you some questions about a person you met earlier, and I'm going to ask you some general questions about their face.
She was thin, so you could see her cheekbones. And her chin, it was a nice, thin chin.
She had nice eyes. They lit up when she spoke.
Cute nose.
She had blue eyes, very nice blue eyes.
So here, this is the sketch that you helped me create, and that's a sketch that somebody described to me.
So yeah, that's...
She looks closed off and fatter, sadder too. The second one looks more open, friendly, and happy.
I should be more grateful of my natural beauty. It impacts the choices and friends that we make, the jobs we apply for, how we treat our children. It impacts everything. It couldn't be more critical to your happiness.
Do you think you're more beautiful than you say?
Yeah. Yeah.
We spend a lot of time as women analyzing and trying to fix the things that aren't quite right. And we should spend more time appreciating the things that we do like.
Jesus drew you as he sees you. What kind of difference would that make in your life? Woman, don't let yourself be judged by some worldly standard, by other men or other women. Jesus is the one, and is the only one that counts. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for the gift of women. Thank you for the way that they reflect your character in a unique way that no male can. Lord, thank you for the women in my life. Thank you for the women in every one of our lives. And I pray that today you would help women, especially those who feel inadequate, inferior, and worthless, to see themselves through your eyes. Lord, if there's one here who's never trusted in Christ, they feel like they are not worth it. Lord, you thought they were worth it enough to die for them in their place. Thank you for loving us so much that you gave your Son, so whosoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. Lord, if there's one who's never trusted in Christ, may today they come in simple faith to the cross of Christ. And may they accept your gift of salvation as is offered so freely at Calvary's cross. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. We're going to sing Wherever He Leads I'll Go. Let's just sing one verse, Mom. As we sing, if you'd like to come and pray at the altar, if you'd like someone to pray with you, I'd love to meet you down there at the altar. Let's sing together. Wherever He leads I'll go. Still. If you'd like, we have our church business meeting now. It should be short.